They stood on the steps of the Manhattan Supreme Court, the rain masking the tears she refused to shed. Marcus didn't just divorce her. He destroyed her. With a cruel smirk, he leaned in and whispered, "Face it, Elena. You were an accessory I can no longer afford to wear. You're nothing without me." He walked away with his arm around a woman half her age, leaving Eleanor penniless and broken. But Marcus made one fatal calculation. He assumed Eleanor would stay down. He never expected that 6 months later, the nothing he discarded would walk into the darkest room in New York City, holding the hand of the one man Marcus was terrified of. This is the story of how a broken wife became a billionaire's obsession and the ultimate revenge. The fluorescent lights of the courtroom in Lower Manhattan hummed with a headache-inducing buzz, but for Eleanor Vance, the sound was drowned out by the pounding of her own heart. She sat at the mahogany table, her hands clasped so tightly together that her knuckles had turned a ghostly white. Across the aisle sat Marcus, her husband of 12 years, the man she had supported when he was fixing computers in their cramped garage in Queens, the man she had nursed through a bout of severe pneumonia when they had no health insurance, the man who was now wearing a $5,000 bespoke Italian suit, checking his Rolex as if this divorce were merely a tedious business meeting that was running overtime. "Mr. Vance," the judge intoned, peering over his spectacles, "you are requesting that the spousal support petition be denied in full based on the infidelity clause in the prenuptial agreement?" Elena's lawyer, a court-appointed attorney named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, stood up shakily. "Your Honor, the infidelity claim is entirely fabricated. Mrs. Vance has been faithful for the entirety of—" "Objection," Marcus's lawyer cut in smoothly. He was Richard Sterling, a man known in New York circles as the Butcher, for how he carved up opponents. "We have submitted digital evidence of Mrs. Vance's correspondence with a former lover." Elena gasped. "That's a lie. Those were emails to my cousin in London." Marcus didn't even look at her. He just tapped his pen on the table, a bored expression on his face. He knew the emails were innocent. He also knew that Sterling had manipulated the context enough to drag this out for years if Eleanor fought it. And he knew Eleanor didn't have the money for a year-long fight. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. "Mrs. Vance, if you contest this evidence, we will need to schedule a forensic discovery phase. This will require a significant retainer for independent auditors." Elena looked at Marcus. For the first time, he turned his head. His eyes, once warm and brown, were now flat and cold, like polished stones. He offered her a tiny, almost imperceptible shrug. It was a message. Give up. She had $400 in her bank account. Marcus had hidden the rest of their assets in offshore shell companies in the Cayman Islands months before he filed. Elena's voice cracked. She cleared her throat. "I withdraw the request for support. I just want it to be over." Mr. Henderson looked at her with pity. "Elena, you're walking away with nothing. You helped him build Vance Tech. You deserve half." "I can't fight him, Robert," she whispered. "He'll bleed me dry before we even get to trial." The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. 20 minutes later, they were outside. The New York autumn weather had turned sharply aggressive, a freezing drizzle coating the grey concrete. Elena was struggling to open her umbrella when Marcus stopped beside her. A black town car idled at the curb. The window rolled down, revealing Tiffany St. Clair. Tiffany was 23, the daughter of a real estate mogul, and an influencer with perfect teeth and empty eyes. She blew a bubble of gum and looked at Eleanor like she was a piece of trash on the sidewalk. "Marcus, hurry up," Tiffany whined. "We have that dinner at Le Bernardin." Marcus buttoned his coat, He stepped close to Eleanor, invading her personal space one last time. "You know," he said, his voice smooth and devoid of any remorse, "I almost feel bad for you. You really tried, didn't you? Being the good little housewife. But you simply didn't scale, Elena. You're like old software. Obsolete." "I built that company with you," Elena said, her voice trembling with a rage she couldn't release. "I wrote the original business plan. I managed the books for 5 years. And I," Marcus sneered, "am the visionary. You were just clerical support. And frankly, you've aged out of the role. Look at you. You look tired." He reached out and flicked a raindrop off her cheap coat. "Do yourself a favor," he added. "Move back to Ohio, or wherever it is people like you go to fade away. Don't embarrass me by staying in the city." He turned and got into the car. As the door closed, Elena saw him lean over and kiss Tiffany, his hand resting possessively on her knee. The car pulled away, splashing dirty gutter water onto Elena's shoes. She stood there for a long time, the cold seeping into her bones. She wasn't crying anymore. The sadness had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard knot in her stomach. Obsolete. She turned and walked toward the subway. She didn't have money for a cab. 3 months later, the high-flying life of being Mrs. Marcus Vance felt like a hallucination. Elena was living in a 4th-floor walk-up in Queens, in a neighborhood where sirens were the nightly lullaby. The apartment smelled permanently of boiled cabbage from the neighbor downstairs, and the heat worked only intermittently. She had applied to dozens of jobs, but at 34, with a 10-year gap in her resume labeled homemaker, the corporate world wasn't interested. They didn't care that she had unofficially run the operations of a multi-million-dollar tech firm. Without the title, she was invisible. She finally landed a job through a temp agency. It wasn't glamorous. It was at Thorne Holdings, an old-money investment firm located in a monolithic skyscraper in Midtown. But she wasn't an executive assistant or a manager. She was a record specialist. In reality, she was an archivist in the basement. Her job was to take boxes of physical contracts dating back to the 1980s, scan them, and organize them into the digital server. It was dusty, lonely work, and it was perfect. No one looked at her. No one recognized her as the former wife of the tech world's rising star, Marcus Vance. She wore oversized sweaters and kept her hair in a messy bun. She was a ghost in the machine. Marcus, meanwhile, was everywhere. Vance Tech was preparing for its IPO, initial public offering. His face was on the cover of Forbes under the headline, "The Solo Genius." The article didn't mention her name once. It claimed Marcus had started the company in his dorm room, alone. One Tuesday, around 1 p.m., Elena was sitting in the small, sterile break room in the basement levels. It was usually empty. The high-powered traders and analysts upstairs ordered sweetgreen or sushi to their desks. The basement was the domain of the janitors and the archivists. She was unwrapping a ham sandwich she'd made at home when the door creaked open. A man walked in. He looked to be in his late 60s, perhaps early 70s. He wore a grey cardigan that had seen better days, and a pair of reading glasses hung around his neck on a crooked chain. He held a thermos that looked dented. He paused when he saw her. "Oh, apologies. I thought this room was usually empty at this hour." Elena smiled politely. She assumed he was part of the maintenance crew, or perhaps a mailroom clerk. "It's okay. There's plenty of room. Please, sit." The man hesitated, then shuffled over to the chair opposite her. He sat down with a heavy sigh that sounded like it carried the weight of the world. He opened his thermos and poured out some tomato soup. "I'm Elena," she said softly. "Arthur," the man replied. He didn't offer a last name. "You're new down here?" "About a month," Elena said. I'm digitizing the 88 mergers. It's riveting stuff." Arthur chuckled dryly. "The 88 mergers, a messy year, a lot of greed in 88. "Isn't there always greed?" Elena asked, a hint of bitterness slipping into her tone before she could catch it. Arthur looked at her over the rim of his plastic cup. His eyes were a startling shade of icy blue, sharp and intelligent, contrasting with his disheveled appearance. "You sound like someone who has seen the ugly side of it." Elena looked down at her sandwich. "You could say that. I learned the hard way that loyalty is a liability in this city." Arthur nodded slowly. "My wife. She used to say that loyalty was rare because it was expensive. Cheap people can't afford it." Elena looked up, surprised. "That's beautiful. Is she—" "Passed 5 years ago," Arthur said. He took a sip of soup. "Now, I just wander the building. Try to stay out of the way of the young wolves upstairs." "I know the feeling," Elena said. She reached into her bag. "I have an extra apple. Would you like it? That soup doesn't look like enough lunch." Arthur stared at the apple in her hand. Then he looked at her face. He seemed to be searching for something. Pity, perhaps, or an agenda. Finding neither, his face softened. "Thank you, Elena. I would like that very much." That was how it started. For the next 2 months, Arthur and Eleanor had lunch together 3 times a week. It became the highlight of her day. They didn't talk about business. They talked about books, about the history of New York architecture, about jazz. Eleanor found him to be incredibly sharp. He knew details about the building's history that were obscure, and sometimes he would make offhand comments about the economy that were frighteningly accurate weeks later. She vented to him, just a little. She told him about an ex who had erased her from his life. She never mentioned Marcus by name. She was too ashamed, and she didn't want to seem like she was bragging about her past proximity to wealth. She just described him as a man who traded her in for a newer model. "He called me obsolete," Elena admitted one rainy afternoon, staring at the vending machine. "He said I didn't scale." Arthur's face darkened. For a second, the kindly old grandfather vibe vanished, replaced by something steely and dangerous. "A man who treats people like assets usually ends up bankrupt in the ways that matter," Arthur growled. "Don't let his blindness define your worth, Elena. You have a sharp mind. I've seen how you reorganized the filing system. You see patterns others miss." "It's just filing, Arthur." She laughed self-deprecatingly. "It is never just filing," he corrected. "It is information architecture." Then, the inciting incident happened. It was a Friday. Elena was called up to the 40th floor, the executive level. This was forbidden territory. The head of HR, a woman named Ms. Gables, who wore shoes that cost more than Elena's car, had summoned her. Elena entered the glass-walled office, terrified. Had she done something wrong? "Ms. Vance," Ms. Gables said, not looking up from her iPad, "we are downsizing the archival department. We've decided to outsource the remaining scanning to a firm in New Jersey. Today is your last day." Elena felt the floor drop out from under her. "But I really need this job. I'm reliable. I'm fast." "It's a budget issue," Ms. Gables said dismissively. "Pack your things. Security will escort you out in an hour." Eleanor stumbled back to the elevator, fighting back tears. Not again. Just as she was getting her footing, the rug was pulled out. She went to the basement to get her coat. She sat in the break room for one last minute, trying to compose herself. The door opened. It was Arthur. "Elena?" He frowned. "You're crying. What happened?" "I got fired." She wiped her eyes, trying to smile for him. "Outsourced. Today's my last day, Arthur. I won't be able to have lunch with you anymore." Arthur stood very still. Who fired you? Ms. Gables, up on the 40th floor. It's okay, Arthur. It's not your fault. I don't know what I'm going to do. Rent is due in 3 days. Arthur set his thermos down on the table with a definitive clunk. He adjusted his crooked glasses. He reached into the pocket of his cardigan and pulled out a phone. It wasn't a cheap flip phone. It was the latest, unreleased prototype of a satellite smartphone. Dry your tears, Elena, Arthur said. His voice had changed. The waver was gone. It was a commanding baritone now. Arthur, what are you doing? I am making a personnel adjustment, he said. He dialed a number and put the phone to his ear. Gables, this is Julian Thorne. Yes, the owner of the building you are standing in. You just fired a woman named Elena Vance. Yes. Well, I'm unfiring her. Elena froze. Julian Thorne? Every business major knew the name. Julian Thorne was the ghost of Wall Street. A recluse billionaire who hadn't been photographed in public in 10 years. He owned Thorne Holdings. He owned half of Midtown. He was rumored to be worth $50 billion. And she had been feeding him apples for 2 months. Arthur, no, Julian, glared at the wall as he listened to the sputtering HR director on the other end. In fact, Julian continued, pack your things, Miss Gables. You lack the intuition required for your role. You're fired. And tell security to bring Miss Vance up to the penthouse suite immediately. She is no longer an archivist. He hung up. He looked at Elena, whose mouth was hanging open. The kindly old man's smile returned, but there was a mischievous glint in his eye. Sorry for the deception, Elena. I like to see how people treat me when they think I'm nobody. It's the only way to get an honest lunch in this town. He extended his arm. Now, shall we go upstairs? I believe we have work to do. And I have a feeling you have some ideas on how to run things better than the idiots I currently employ. The elevator ride from the basement to the 50th floor penthouse took 45 seconds. But for Elena, it felt like traveling between 2 different dimensions. When the doors slid open, the smell of stale coffee and dust was replaced by the scent of white tea and expensive leather. The penthouse wasn't just an office, it was a command center. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, the very city that had chewed Elena up and spat her out. Julian Thorne walked in ahead of her, shedding his Arthur cardigan to reveal a crisp, white dress shirt underneath. He didn't look like a frail old man anymore. He looked like a titan. Sit, Julian commanded, pointing to a chair made of Italian leather that probably cost more than Elena's entire wardrobe. Elena sat, her hands trembling slightly. Mr. Thorne, Julian, he corrected, pouring himself a glass of sparkling water from a crystal decanter. And stop shaking. It annoys me. You didn't shake when you were debating me about the 1929 crash last week. That was theoretical. This is real, Elena stammered. Why are you doing this? You could hire the best MBA graduates from Harvard. Julian walked over to the window, looking down at the ants scurrying on the streets below. I have hired them. They are boring. They think in straight lines. They are taught how to maintain wealth, not how to build it or protect it from wolves. You, Elena, have survival instincts. You managed the operations of a tech startup with no budget, and you navigated a divorce where you were outgunned. You are hungry. The Harvard kids are just greedy. There is a difference. He turned back to her. I have a proposition. You are not going to be my archivist. You are going to be my associate strategist. Your salary is $250,000 a year, effective immediately, plus bonuses. Elena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. That was 5 times what Marcus had given her, as an allowance when they were married. However, Julian raised a finger. There is a condition. You have to unlearn everything Marcus taught you. He taught you to be small. He taught you to be a support system. In my world, you are either the predator or the prey. I am going to teach you how to hunt. The next 6 months were a blur of exhaustion and exhilaration. Elena didn't just work, she underwent a metamorphosis. Julian was a demanding mentor. He threw complex portfolios at her at 6 a.m. and expected a full risk analysis by noon. He critiqued her posture, her speaking voice, and even her silence. "Stop apologizing," he snapped at her one afternoon when she dropped a pen. Men like Marcus count apologies. They collect them like tokens of submission. Never apologize for existing. The transformation wasn't just internal. Julian insisted she dress the part. He sent a personal stylist to her tiny apartment in Queens, which she soon vacated for a sleek, secure condo in Tribeca. The oversized sweaters were replaced by tailored blazers, sharp pencil skirts, and stilettos that clicked on the marble floors like weapons of war. But the hardest part was dealing with the whispers. The staff at Thorne Holdings were baffled. Who was this woman who had ascended from the basement to the right hand of the ghost of Wall Street? The rumors were vicious. They said she was his nurse. They said she was his mistress. They said she was a gold digger who had manipulated a senile old man. Elena heard them in the break room, the hushed giggles when she walked by. It stung, reminding her of Tiffany St. Clair's mockery. She brought it up to Julian one evening while they were reviewing Asian market futures. "They think I'm sleeping with you," she said bluntly. Julian didn't look up from his papers. "Let them. It doesn't bother you." "Elena, people will always create a narrative that makes them feel comfortable with their own mediocrity. If they think you're sleeping your way to the top, it excuses them from facing the fact that you are simply smarter than they are. Their underestimation is your greatest asset. Never correct them. Let them think you are a distracted mistress. Then, when you cut their throats in the boardroom, they won't even see the knife coming." He slid a thick blue folder across the mahogany desk toward her. "Speaking of knives," Julian said, his eyes gleaming. "Look at this." Elena opened the folder. The title on the first page made her blood run cold. "Vance Technologies, IPO Prospectus. They are going public next month," Julian said. "The street is calling it the unicorn of the decade. Analysts are valuing the IPO at $4 billion. Marcus is poised to become one of the richest men in the country." Elena stared at the logo she had sketched on a napkin in a diner 10 years ago. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, her voice tight. "Because I'm thinking of buying a substantial short position," Julian said. "But the numbers look perfect. Too perfect. Revenue is up 400% quarter over quarter. User retention is 99%. It's a miracle company." He paused. "You kept the books, Elena. You know the source code of the business. Is Marcus a miracle worker?" Elena opened the file. She began to read. At first it looked legitimate, but then her eyes narrowed. She flipped to page 45, then back to page 12. She pulled out a calculator. Her heart began to race. Not with fear, but with recognition. "Here," she pointed to a line item labeled Deferred Service Acquisitions. "What about it?" "Marcus used to try this when we were small," Elena said, her mind sharpening, the memories of late-night accounting sessions flooding back. He counts projected contracts as signed contracts to inflate the quarterly revenue. He calls it anticipatory accounting. It's illegal, but he hides it by routing the money through shell vendors to make it look like paid invoices. She grabbed a pen and circled 3 vendor names in the footnotes. Apex Solutions, Blue River Data, Orion Systems. I named these, she whispered. These aren't real companies. They were placeholders I created for testing the database software years ago. He never deleted them. He's using them to wash his own money back into the company to fake revenue growth. Julian sat back, a slow, terrifying smile spreading across his face. So, he mused, the $4 billion company is a house of cards. If anyone audits these 3 vendors, Elena said, looking up, her eyes fierce, Vanstech goes to 0. Julian closed the folder. Elena, get your coat. Where are we going? We are going shopping, Julian said. Next week is the Titan Gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Marcus will be there to court investors for the IPO. I haven't attended a public event in 10 years, but I think it's time I introduced New York to my new partner. Partner. You just handed me the weapon to destroy a fraud, Julian said. You're not an associate anymore, Elena. You're a partner. Now, let's go find you a dress that says, I know where the bodies are buried. The Titan Gala was the Oscars of the business world. Held annually at the Met, it was a convergence of old money, tech billionaires, and A-list celebrities. The steps of the museum were draped in red carpet, flanked by walls of paparazzi screaming the names of the elite. Marcus Vance stepped out of his limousine, flashing his signature winning smile. He looked every inch the conqueror. His tuxedo was Tom Ford, customized. On his arm was Tiffany St. Clair, wearing a sheer, diamond-encrusted gown that left little to the imagination. Marcus, over here, the photographers shouted. Is it true the IPO is oversubscribed? Let's just say, Marcus quipped to a reporter from CNBC, the future looks very bright. Vanstech is about to change the world. Inside the great hall, the atmosphere was electric. Champagne flowed like water. Marcus moved through the crowd like a shark in a tank of guppies. He shook hands with senators, laughed with hedge fund managers, and accepted congratulations on his upcoming billionaire status. He felt invincible. He had shed the dead weight of his past life, Eleanor, and ascended to the Olympus of wealth. This is boring, Tiffany complained, sipping her champagne. Can we go to the after-party yet? Hush, babe, Marcus muttered. I need to talk to the guys from Goldman. Just look pretty. Suddenly, a hush fell over the room. It started near the entrance and rippled outward, silencing the jazz band and the chatter. Heads turned, glasses were lowered, the massive doors at the top of the stairs had opened. Oh my God, someone whispered near Marcus. Is that Julian Thorne? Marcus whipped his head around. It couldn't be. Thorne was a hermit, a ghost. He hadn't been seen at a gala since 2012. But there he was. Julian Thorne stood at the top of the staircase, looking like a king surveying his subjects. He wore a classic black tuxedo, his silver hair swept back, radiating an aura of terrifying power. But it wasn't just Julian that had the room paralyzed. It was the woman on his arm. She was stunning. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged her curves and pooled on the floor like liquid night. The dress was off the shoulder, revealing an elegant neck adorned with a necklace of sapphires and diamonds that looked heavy enough to sink a ship. Her hair was styled in glamorous old Hollywood waves. Her makeup was flawless, highlighting cheekbones that could cut glass. She looked regal, dangerous, and utterly unattainable. Marcus squinted. There was something familiar about the way she stood, the tilt of her chin, the arch of her brow. The woman began to descend the stairs with Julian, moving with a grace that commanded the attention of every lens in the room. Who is she? Tiffany asked, sounding jealous. Is that a model? As they got closer to the floor, the woman's eyes scanned the crowd. They locked onto Marcus. And then she smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of an executioner who had just sharpened the blade. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. His champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor, the sound echoing in the silent hall. "Elena," he whispered. It was impossible. The frumpy, tired woman he had discarded in the rain? The woman who wore clearance rack coats and worried about coupons? This woman looked like she owned the museum. The crowd parted as Julian and Eleanor walked through. They didn't stop for the press. They walked straight into the center of the VIP circle. Marcus stood frozen, his shoes crunching on the broken glass of his drink. Tiffany was tugging at his arm. "Marcus, what is wrong with you? Who is that?" "That," Marcus choked out, his throat dry as sandpaper, "is my ex-wife." "The loser?" Tiffany laughed incredulously. "That is not a loser, Marcus. That woman is wearing the Romanov sapphires. I saw them in a magazine. They're worth $3 million. Eleanor and Julian stopped a few feet away, surrounded by a ring of admirers. Marcus watched as the CEO of Chase Bank rushed over to kiss Eleanor's hand. He watched as a senator leaned in to whisper something that made Elena laugh. A throaty, confident laugh he had never heard before. Anger replaced his shock. How dare she? How dare she come here, on his night, looking like that? She was supposed to be in Ohio. She was supposed to be miserable. He straightened his jacket. He was Marcus Vance. He was about to be a billionaire. She was just some arm candy for a geriatric relic. "Stay here," Marcus snapped to Tiffany. He pushed his way through the crowd, marching towards them. He needed to put her back in her place. He needed to break the illusion. "Well, well," Marcus's voice boomed, interrupting a conversation Eleanor was having with a tech investor. "I didn't know the retirement home organized field trips." The circle fell silent. The tension was palpable. Julian Thorne turned slowly, looking at Marcus with mild amusement, as if he were a noisy insect. "Mr. Vance," Julian said coolly. "A pleasure to finally see the face behind the creative accounting." Marcus ignored Julian. He focused his eyes on Eleanor. He raked his gaze over her dress, trying to make her feel cheap. "And Eleanor," Marcus smirked. "You clean up nice. I guess you found a new sponsor. I hope he pays better than I did. Although, looking at the jewelry, I assume the services required are quite extensive." The crowd gasped. It was a crude, brutal insult. Tiffany, who had followed him, giggled. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't look down. She didn't blush. She took a slow sip of her water, then handed the glass to a passing waiter. She turned her body fully toward Marcus. She was taller in her heels than he remembered. Or maybe he had just become smaller. "Hello, Marcus," she said. Her voice was steady, low and smooth. "It's been a while. I see you're still wearing that suit. The lapels are a bit wide for this season, don't you think?" "Don't play games with me," Marcus hissed, stepping closer. "You don't belong here, Elena. You're a fraud. You think wearing a costume changes who you are. You're a secretary, a housewife. You're nothing." Elena smiled again. "Actually, Marcus, I'm not a housewife anymore. I'm a partner at Thorne Holdings." She let the title hang in the air. "And as a partner," she continued, her voice raising slightly so the surrounding investors could hear, "I've been reviewing the prospectus for Vance Tech. It's a fascinating piece of fiction. Tell me, how are things at Apex Solutions these days? Do they still operate out of that P.O. box in Delaware?" The color drained from Marcus's face, instantly. It was as if she had punched him in the gut. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, looking around nervously. The investors nearby were now listening intently. "Don't you?" Elena asked innocently. "Because according to your ledger, They generated 30% of your revenue last quarter. It would be a shame if the SEC found out that Apex Solutions has no employees, no product, and a bank account linked to your personal trust in the Caymans. Silence. Absolute, deathly silence. The CEO of Chase Bank, who was standing nearby, narrowed his eyes at Marcus. "Is that true, Vance?" "She's lying," Marcus shouted, his voice cracking. "She's a bitter ex-wife. She's crazy." "I have the transaction logs, Marcus," Elena said softly. She reached into her clutch, not for a lipstick, but for a folded piece of paper. She didn't hand it to Marcus. She handed it to the journalist from the Wall Street Journal, standing to her right. "You might find this interesting for tomorrow's morning edition." Marcus lunged for the paper. "Give that back." Two massive security guards stepped in front of Julian and Eleanor, blocking Marcus's path. Julian finally spoke. "Mr. Vance, I suggest you leave. My legal team has already forwarded a digital copy of that document to the district attorney. I believe they will be waiting for you at your office in the morning." Marcus looked around. The admiration in the room had vanished. It was replaced by looks of disgust and suspicion. The photographers were now snapping photos of his panic, his sweat, his ruin. Tiffany St. Clair looked at Marcus, then at the paper in the journalist's hand. She realized the yacht parties were over. "You're an idiot!" she hissed at Marcus. She turned on her heel and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. "Elena, please," Marcus whispered, the fight leaving him. He looked small again. "We can talk about this. I can explain. Don't do this." Elena looked at him with an expression that hurt him more than anger. Indifference. "You said I didn't scale, Marcus," she said. "You were right. I didn't scale with your lies." She turned to Julian. "I'm bored. Shall we get dinner?" "I know a great place," Julian smiled. "They make excellent soup." As they walked away, leaving Marcus surrounded by shouting reporters and angry investors, Elena didn't look back. She wasn't an accessory anymore. She was the main event. The morning after the Titan Gala, the sun rose over New York City. But for Marcus Vance, it was the beginning of a long, dark winter. He woke up not in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, but on a leather sofa in his lawyer's office. He had spent the night shredding documents until Richard Sterling, the butcher, had slapped his hand and told him to stop before he added obstruction of justice to the list of charges. Marcus pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped it twice. When he finally unlocked the screen, the notifications were an avalanche of ruin. The Wall Street Journal, Vance Technologies. Fraud. CEO accused of $200 million shell game. Twitter, Vance Tech scam is trending #1 worldwide. CNBC, Vance Tech IPO, halted by SEC indefinitely. And then, the personal blow. He opened Instagram. Tiffany St. Clair had posted a photo. It was a selfie of her on a private jet, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "Toxic people are a drain on your energy. New beginnings. Single life. Dubai." She hadn't just left him. She had broadcasted it to her 3 million followers before his coffee was even cold. "Marcus," Sterling walked in, looking disheveled and grim. "We have a problem. The SEC is downstairs. They have a warrant for your electronic devices." "Don't let them in!" Marcus screamed, jumping up. "I pay you to stop this." "I can't stop the federal government, Marcus," Sterling shouted back, losing his composure. "And there's something else. The banks have frozen your personal accounts. The credit lines for the company have been pulled. You are liquidating at a rate of $10 million an hour." Marcus sank back onto the sofa. "Fix it. Call Elena. She knows the books. She can explain that it was just creative projections." "Elena Vance is the one who handed them the map, you idiot," Sterling spat, and she's not taking my calls. In fact, she's currently on Bloomberg TV. Sterling grabbed the remote and turned on the wall-mounted TV. There she was. Elena sat in a sleek, modern studio, looking calm and authoritative. The chyron under her name read, Elena Vance, partner, Thorn Holdings. Ms. Vance, the interviewer asked, did you know about the fraud while you were married to him? I knew the finances were tight, Elena said, her voice measured. But Marcus was very secretive about the special projects ledger. It was only when I analyzed the prospectus with the team at Thorn Holdings that the pattern became undeniable. It's a tragedy for the employees who worked hard. That is why Thorn Holdings has made an offer to acquire the legitimate assets of Vance Tech to save the jobs of the engineers. Marcus stared at the screen, his mouth agape. She's trying to buy my company? She's not trying, Marcus, Sterling said, checking his email on his phone. She just did. The board of directors just held an emergency vote via Zoom. They ousted you. They accepted Thorn's liquidity injection. You're out. The company is hers. Marcus felt the room spin. The company he had built, the empire that was supposed to make him a god. It was gone, snapped up by the wife he had called obsolete. He grabbed his coat. Where are you going? Sterling yelled. The police are downstairs. I have to see her, Marcus muttered, his eyes wide and unblinking. She can't do this. She still loves me. I know she does. This is just a tantrum. He ran out the back exit, down the fire escape, dodging the flashing lights of the police cruisers out front. He hailed a cab, pulling his collar up to hide his face. Where to? The driver asked. The Thorn building, Marcus whispered. And drive fast. The lobby of the Thorn building was a fortress of marble and glass. When Marcus burst in, looking manic and unshaven in yesterday's tuxedo, 3 security guards immediately stepped into his path. I need to see Elena Vance, Marcus shouted. Tell her it's her husband. Ex-husband, a deep voice corrected. Marcus looked up. Standing on the mezzanine level was Julian Thorn. He looked down at Marcus with a mixture of pity and distaste. Let him up, Julian nodded to the guards. Elena is expecting him. Marcus was escorted into the elevator. He smoothed his hair, trying to regain some semblance of control. She wants to see me, he told himself. She wants to negotiate. She probably misses me. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. Elena stood by the window, looking out at the city. She didn't turn around when he entered. You look terrible, Marcus, she said, her reflection in the glass catching his eye. Elena, Marcus walked toward her, arms open. Baby, listen. You've made your point. You scared me, okay? I get it. You're smart. You're powerful. But you don't have to destroy me. We were a team once. We can be a team again. Think about it. You and me, running Vance Tech together. With your capital and my vision. Elena finally turned. Her face was unreadable. Your vision? She asked softly. Your vision was to lie to investors and stash cash in the Caribbean while I clipped coupons for groceries. Your vision was to humiliate me in front of the world and replace me with a child. That was a mistake, Marcus pleaded. Tiffany meant nothing. It was a midlife crisis. I'm over it. I want you back, Elle. He reached for her hand. Elena took a step back, looking at his hand as if it were covered in slime. You don't want me, Marcus. You want a life raft. She walked over to the desk and picked up a thick document. Do you know what this is? Marcus squinted. It looks like a deed. It is, Elena said. It's the deed to the house in the Hamptons you bought last month, the one you put in the company's name to avoid taxes. She picked up another paper. And this is the title to your Ferrari. She picked up a third. And this is the promissory note for your legal fees. Mr. Sterling called me. Apparently, your assets are frozen, and you couldn't pay his retainer. So, I bought your debt." Marcus backed away, hitting the wall. You own my lawyer?" "I own your debt, Marcus, which means I own you." Elena walked closer to him, her heels clicking rhythmically. She stopped inches from his face. She smelled of expensive perfume and cold victory. "I'm not going to send you to jail, Marcus," she said quietly. Hope flickered in his eyes. "You're not?" "No, that would be too easy. And honestly, I don't want to waste my time testifying." She tossed the papers onto the coffee table. "I made a deal with the SEC. They're going to ban you from serving as an officer of a public company for life. You will never be a CEO again. You will never sit on a board. You will never sign a check for a company." "But that's my life," Marcus cried. "That's all I know." "Then you'll have to learn something new," Elena said, her voice hardening. "Like I did." She went to her purse and pulled out a single item. It was a subway card. She pressed it into his hand. "Here," she said. "There's $20 on this. It should get you to Queens. I hear the garage we used to rent is available. Maybe you can start over. Fix some computers. Do some honest work for the first time in your life." "Elena, please," Marcus sobbed, falling to his knees. "I have nothing. Everyone hates me. I have nowhere to go." Elena looked down at him. She waited for the pang of guilt. She waited to feel that old instinct to nurture him, to fix him, to sacrifice herself to make him feel better. She felt nothing, just a profound sense of lightness. The chains were gone. "You said I was obsolete," Elena whispered. "But look at us now, Marcus. I'm the future. You're just history." She pressed a button on her desk. "Security? Please escort Mr. Vance out of the building and make sure he uses the service elevator. We don't want him upsetting the clients." 2 guards hauled a weeping Marcus to his feet. As they dragged him out, he looked back one last time, seeing Elena standing in the sunlight, golden and untouchable. 1 year later, the air in Silicon Alley was thick with anticipation. It wasn't just another tech launch, it was a resurrection. The glass facade of the building, formerly known as Vance Tech, was draped in massive white silk sheets, concealing the new branding that the entire financial world was speculating about. Elena stood backstage in the green room, adjusting the lapel of her white bespoke suit. It was a sharp departure from the grey and black she used to wear to blend into the background. Today, she was designed to stand out. 3 minutes to curtain, Ms. Vance," a production assistant whispered, tapping her headset nervously. Elena looked in the mirror. She didn't see the tired, discarded wife anymore. She saw a woman who had walked through fire and forged herself into steel. "Ready?" Julian asked. He was sitting on a velvet couch, looking every bit the proud mentor. He had officially stepped out of retirement to serve as the chairman of the board, but everyone knew Elena was the captain of the ship. "I was born ready," Elena replied. "I just didn't know it until you handed me that apple." She walked out onto the stage. The auditorium, packed with 2,000 journalists, investors, and former skeptics, erupted. The applause was deafening, a physical wave of sound. Elena raised a hand, commanding silence. "For a long time," she began, her voice amplified and crystal clear. "This company was built on a promise of the future that was never grounded in reality. You were sold a vision that was nothing more than smoke. But smoke clears, and when it does, you are left with only what is real." She pressed a button on the remote in her hand. Behind her, the massive screen flickered to life. The old, jagged V logo of Vance Tech shattered digitally. the shards falling away to reveal a new symbol. It was a stylized golden E, but if you looked closely, the negative space formed the profile of a lioness. Evolve Systems. "We are no longer Vance Tech," Elena announced. "We are Evolve, because in nature and in business, you either evolve or you go extinct." The crowd roared its approval. The stock ticker on the side of the stage showed the share price jumping 12% in real time. Later that afternoon, the celebrations moved to the executive suite. The vibe was entirely different from the frantic, fear-based culture Marcus had cultivated. Under Marcus, the office had been a frat house of nervous energy and impossible deadlines. Under Elena, it was a finely tuned orchestra. She walked through the open-plan office, greeting engineers by name. She stopped at the desk of Sarah, a junior developer Marcus had once threatened to fire for taking maternity leave. "How is the new encryption protocol coming along, Sarah?" Elena asked. "It's ready for beta, Ms. Vance," Sarah beamed. "And thank you for the on-site daycare center. I don't know how I would have managed without it." "Talent requires support, not pressure," Elena smiled. "Keep up the good work." This was the secret Marcus never understood. Loyalty wasn't bought with flashy parties, it was earned through respect. By stabilizing the company's finances and treating the staff like human beings, Elena had unleashed a wave of productivity that analysts were calling the Vance Miracle, though Elena hated the name. As evening fell, Elena retired to her private office, the same office where Marcus had once dismissed her ideas as clerical. She sat at the desk, opening a drawer. Inside was a small framed photo of her and Marcus from 10 years ago. They looked happy, young, and naive. She didn't hate him anymore. Hate required energy. She just felt a distant, cool pity. Meanwhile, 20 miles away in a strip mall in New Jersey, the reality was very different. Marcus Vance sat on a stool behind the counter of PC Fix, a small repair shop that smelled of burnt solder and dust. He wore a blue polo shirt that was a size too small. "Hey, buddy," a customer grunted, slamming a greasy laptop onto the counter. "My screen is flickering again. I thought you said you fixed it." "It's a graphics card issue," Marcus muttered, not making eye contact. "I told you that you needed to replace the motherboard." "Don't give me that tech mumbo-jumbo," the customer snapped. "Just fix it, or I'm speaking to your manager." Marcus flinched. The manager was a 19-year-old kid named Kyle, who enjoyed bossing Marcus around. Above the counter, a small TV was playing the news. And in business news, Evolve Systems, led by CEO Elena Vance, has just surpassed a market cap of $5 billion. Elena Vance has been named Person of the Year by Time magazine. Marcus looked up. On the screen, Elena looked radiant. She was laughing at something the interviewer said. A free, genuine laugh he hadn't heard in years. She looked like a queen. The customer tapped on the glass counter. "Hey, Earth to Genius, are you going to fix my laptop or are you going to stare at the TV?" Marcus swallowed the lump in his throat. He looked down at his hands that used to sign million-dollar checks, now stained with thermal paste. I'll fix it," Marcus whispered. "Right away." Back in Manhattan, the sun had set, and the city lights were twinkling below Elena's penthouse. Julian poured 2 glasses of 1945 Romanée Conti, a bottle worth more than Marcus's current annual salary. "To the lioness," Julian toasted. "To the hunt," Elena replied, clinking her glass against his. "You know," Julian said, leaning back and looking at the skyline, "we have a surplus of cash flow this quarter, about 400 million. What are you planning to do with it? Buy an island? Retire?" Elena walked to the window. She saw her reflection in the glass, superimposed over the city. She saw the scars of the past, but they weren't wounds anymore. They were armor. "I was thinking about the transportation sector," Elena said thoughtfully. "I had a terrible flight to London last week. The logistics are archaic. The customer experience is insulting." Julian raised an eyebrow, a smile playing on his lips. "You want to buy an airline?" "I don't want to buy one." Elena turned to him, her eyes gleaming with that dangerous, brilliant spark. "I want to build one that actually works. I think I'll call it Ascend." "The industry is a graveyard for billionaires," Julian warned, though he looked delighted. "Good," Elena replied. "Then there's plenty of space for me to bury the competition." She took a sip of the wine. It tasted like victory. Elena Vance had been a wife, a victim, and a ghost. But as she looked out over the world she now commanded, she realized she was finally something else. She was the author of her own story, and she was just turning the page to chapter 1. And that is the story of Elena and Marcus. It's a powerful reminder that you should never underestimate someone just because they are kind, or quiet, or loyal. Marcus thought Elena was weak because she supported him, but he failed to realize that she was the foundation holding him up. When he broke that foundation, he didn't just lose a wife, he toppled his own empire. What do you think? Did Marcus deserve his fate? Or was Eleanor too harsh in the end? And have you ever had someone doubt you, only for you to prove them wrong later? Let me know your story in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. We upload new drama every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on your way up. You might meet them on your way down.